Hi, everybody. Welcome to Binford Chronicles. We're getting ready to hook up to X Space so that we can meet with Kevin McDonald, candidate for School Board District 5. All right. Good evening, Kevin. How are you?
Eric, am I working?
Yes, you are. It's working.
Good. Okay, great.
Yeah, we tried this the other day, and we were having a little difficulty, Mike, but looks like Kevin got on just fine. So I wanted to thank everybody for coming to Binford Chronicles. We have Kevin McDonald on today, and he's going to be responding to some questions that we have. And if you guys feel like you'd like to ask some questions, just raise your hands, and that will move you into the speaker spot. So, Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. Busy end of month, but sort of keeping up with things.
Oh,
How are
very,
you?
very good. I'm doing really, really well. And the first thing I wanted to ask you about is if you could tell us a little about what classical school is about, because I know a lot of people are talking about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's classical school is sort of what most of us grew up with, those of us who were old like me, but based on the way Plato and Aristotle taught a couple thousand years ago, called the trivium. It starts with working on grammar, then logic and reason. A main focus is developing a virtuous character, and it uses a lot of the classical pieces of literature. Most curriculums will also include Latin in part of the education. Um, as a separate piece, our school and many others use Singapore math, which was discovered to be an exceptional method for teaching math, and many people who are using a classical curriculum have tapped into that as well. So it's something that I think is the right way to go, and many educators agree.
I was reading an article where they said in north part of the county they're thinking about starting a magnet school that's going to model after classical school. Is that correct information?
That is the plan, yes. The Dr. Moore is pretty strongly on board with the idea, and done some community research which reinforced the interest. We do have space on the north part of the county. We have two schools that are currently at 50% capacity, which I think is one of the factors driving this. They realize they've lost more than 800, I think it's 840 students in the last 5 years in an area that's growing in population. And so they realize with that, and with the advent of vouchers, scholarships, that parents can have other choices, and we are in a competitive business environment now. We have to find out and address what customers want. The customers are our parents. And many parents are going to private schools or even homeschooling with a classical curriculum. So it's popular, it's been successful, it's proven itself superior. And so he has wisely recognized that and is looking at offering that as a magnet school to expand the parental choice.
So I'm thinking that's Fellsmere. So would that be Fellsmere Elementary? Are they going to transition that or start a different school?
Well, the school will start in one of those buildings, and students who are currently attending that building will get the first option to apply. And then for whatever additional seats they have available, that will be opened up to the rest of the community the same way as other magnet schools are offered.
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm in Fellsmere. Well, first of all, let me thank you for sitting down with us. And I really appreciate you stepping into the role you are. I think the district should be grateful for having you. And back onto the question, my kids both go to Fellsmere, and my daughter is in the dual enrollment program, which I'd like to speak on. But also, we had news of a new private school coming to the area that was in partnership with the district. Is that the same thing? Or are we talking about two different schools?
I'm not sure what you heard. I don't know of any private school that we're in partnership with, so that might have been a confluence of rumors. There is another private classical school that started this past year that's now operating in Vero Beach. I think it's more mid-south area of Vero Beach, but they're using a classical curriculum as well. So it may have been maybe a combination of those two ideas. But this would be a public school, it would be a magnet school, and it would be fully under the auspices of the school district.
Okay, yeah, because what we were told at an open house is this is like a branch off of the New Wave Academy, which is based out of Miami, and they're offering a middle school starting next year here in Fellsmere, which sounded appealing to a lot of these families here in Fellsmere, because after Fellsmere Elementary, your next step is going into Sebastian.
Mm-hmm. I don't believe that Fellsmere is the intended location, or I don't think it's one of the two expected locations for this magnet school. So it might be something different.
Hmm.
Thank you. My second thing I wanted to bring up, I don't want to jump, change direction. If I am, stop me, Joanne. But the dual language program that Fellsmere does, you'll hear me talk a lot about Fellsmere, especially when we see each other in person, because I think the principal there is doing an outstanding job. The music teacher is doing an outstanding job with these kids, but specifically the dual language program, which my daughter's been in since the inception in her kindergarten years. She's now going into fourth grade. And what it offers them is it's such a great avenue for keeping their scores up. And data that the school gave us last week was that kids in this program were scoring significantly higher of the district average on the FAST test. Do we have any of that information released to the public yet? Has the state released that information yet?
I have not seen it, but Dr. Moore and I did not have our weekly meeting today because of Memorial Day, so I will be seeing him again on Monday, and if there's new data out, that may be part of what he's going to share.
Okay, and then is that something you would support if the data provides it's a benefit, expanding the program into middle school? Because currently it will be going into its fourth grade and soon on into middle school, and the concern is kids will lose that benefit. Is that something you would support, and would you look more into that, provided
I would be happy to look into it. If you're telling me that the data is showing and that the students and parents are reporting that we have a successful and superior approach that's showing in the students as well as in the testing to be superior, that should be exactly what we want to achieve. And again, this idea of classical curriculum may well be the right choice for many parents and students, and may well not be the right choice for other students. One thing we found, and Dr. Moore has talked about, he's got, I think, 3 different children, and they were all educated in 3 different ways. And so each one sort of thrived in one area. In fact, I spoke to somebody a couple of weeks ago about that new classical school that opened up, and they told me about their child who was very smart, but really hated the school that he was in, and enrolled in this classical school this year and loves it. There's just different approaches tend to work with different specific people and children, and where we can match those two things, that will give them the best results. It'll show up in our presumably in our test results and tell us that we're doing the right thing. But every child is different, and if you've got a school that's working out well and testing out well, that should be something very high on our list of considerations.
I agree. Having these options, I think, is probably the best thing I've heard Dr. Moore bringing to the district. especially with the increase of children leaving the school district, for better or for worse, I think options are great. And school choice, thank God for school choice, because we're seeing a lot of students that aren't in Fellsmere coming to Fellsmere for this program. So I think it's worth looking into. If I could persuade you to check your email, I sent you guys an email last week pertaining to it. And
I did read it.
And
It was a glowing report, and I was impressed. I said, "Is this real?" Or is somebody just a paid political advertisement for the local principal? It was a very strong email.
Thank you. I have help writing some of my stuff, but I appreciate that. And it really is. If I can urge any board member to sit in at Fellsmere Elementary and see what Mr. E, I can't pronounce his last name, forgive me, Mr. E, but the job he does there is definitely outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make a point of that.
Hey Kevin, I wanted to ask about, I always bring it up because I grew up when I went to school, we had shop classes in middle school and we don't have those anymore in schools. Do you think there's any good talk of maybe bringing like wood shop back, some shop classes back that teach the kids some skills that they are going to use in later in life, or it shows them options of even careers that they might want to start thinking about when they go to high school? What do you think about that?
When I first met with the prior seat holder in December to chat with him and find out if he intended to run again, that was one of the things that I brought up. And he said, well, we've got Treasure Coast Technical College, which is good if you're 45, or if you're graduating, you want to become a nurse technician, that's wonderful. But I completely agree with you. I've not looked into it. We never had this discussion yet in the times I've sat down with Dr. Morse. I don't think that's specifically on the top of the agenda, but when I met with him in December, I said, there aren't a lot of 50-story corporate headquarters here. If we're training all our kids to hopefully get themselves into a college and get them a college degree and maybe an advanced degree, you're sending them to some big city and they don't get to live where they grew up. You're basically trying to force your children away, whereas a lot of children would just as soon continue their life in and around Vero Beach and in the county and nearby, and they need to have skills that make them match the kind of work we got here. I don't have a huge amount of white collar work, but we do have a lot of services work. So electricians and shop technicians, and we're doing things with your hands. They're great skills for a career. They're also great skills just to have. I took my junior high, we had some shop classes, and I took drafting. My penmanship was lousy, but back then it was pretty good because they taught me how to write, and it taught me how to understand how that works. And my brother, who told us a few years ago that he never took a book home in his life, and he didn't go to class as often as he could avoid it, was one of the worst students in the world, but he did go to shop classes. He became very handy, and that gave him a pretty successful career in building and a lot of mechanical stuff. So I think that if we don't have it, we should see how we can find and add that. I know there's cost or space issues, but the good news with space is if we're losing students, that's creating opportunities for us to be creative.
Yeah, because I remember, when I was younger and I took shop classes, my first experience with shop classes was in junior high, and I think I was in seventh grade. It was sixth through eighth grade, sixth, seventh, and and high school was ninth through 12th. But when we went to middle school, I took cooking, I took sewing, I took woodwork, I took printing, because back then we had the printing press, But it was really good for me to take all those classes because I came from a divorced family, so my mom was a single mom and we couldn't afford a lot of clothing, and the sewing class taught me how to sew clothes. So if my mom went to the what do you call it, the Salvation Army, and got me somebody else's pants that didn't fit right, I literally took the sewing needle out and sewed them so they fit me. And I know we have a lot of kids and families out there struggling, but they don't even know how to sew. And those are like life skills. They're skills that you use and you put them to use. And just cooking, like like I said, I had a single mom. Sometimes she wasn't home when I got home from school, and I had to cook my own meal. So these are really life skills that I thought helped me growing up with a single parent, because I was like, well, this is what I got to learn to do to live, you know? And I would love to see those come back, especially for boys. I can't tell you how many boys were in my woodshop class. There were hardly any girls in it. And boys just love doing things with their hands. And if they don't like working with math, this gives them an opportunity to see the relationship, how math works in our daily lives, you know, the algorithms that we have in life. It just expands their knowledge and curiosity, because if you want to build yourself a toolbox, you need to take measurements, and that's when it really comes into play. And sometimes I think growing up, that made me think about things more as well, because I had to use those skills, and I could use those skills.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason we send kids to school is not just so parents can work all day and have someone take care of them, although that tends to be one of the functions, but the real reason is to prepare these children so they can become young adults and adults and acclimate into our society, be happy and fulfilled and satisfied, and be good neighbors, and to be fully functional when they leave these schools. And I mean, we don't teach them how to balance a checkbook, and they don't know necessarily how to do laundry. There's a lot of things that it would really be helpful. And I don't necessarily think we're going to have a laundry class, but it would be smart to have a class at some point that teach people the basics of balancing checkbooks. And all of this that you're talking about really relates to not just hypothetical learning, but integrating what you learn into the world around you. Mm-hmm. And that's when it becomes interesting, is not just, 87 times 2 is 174. I think that's right. Hope it's right. But you want to be able to say, well, if I've got 87 of these things and I got to buy 2 of them and they're $1 a piece, how many dollars? It's when you realize why you need to learn this that really sparks and opens up channels in the brain that many children, it doesn't work because they don't see how you apply it. So I agree. I think it's a great thing, and you're right about particularly, I don't know about girls, but the boys do like to work and fix things, and it's really valuable too. I mean, science and math were my high spots, but I still loved the different shop type courses I took. I remember the hot dog cooker I made in junior high, and I took a welding class in college and really enjoyed that. There's a lot to understanding how to do things with your hands, and probably the greatest thing is when you can create something that wasn't there. It gives you a real deep feeling of satisfaction and a feeling of capability. And you can do math. You can get an A on a math test, and you don't come home feeling like I'm capable of doing something. When I was in kindergarten, we made a little clay. I remember a little clay desk thing that had a spot for a pen and a little slot for a piece of paper, and brought that home to our parents. But I felt wonderful that I'd actually made a tangible thing. And mm-hmm. I think that's a big part of rounding out people's not only self-confidence but abilities. It's got to be a very complicated world, and not everything is fixed on a computer. In fact, my wife's brother, who doesn't know which end of a hammer to use, grew up in New York. She had to go down to West Palm for him to change a doorknob because he didn't know how to change a doorknob. Going like, if you get to be 60 years old and you can't change a doorknob, somebody cheated you someplace.
Yeah. So, Kevin, you stepped in because Barefoot didn't know his district and kind of resigned. And so you had to kind of pick up right there. And I'm wondering what has been your experience since you've been in that seat, and what kind of events have you been to, and how are you developing any ideas or seeing anything that's really great that you want to share with us?
Well, we've had, what have we had? I think April, May, I guess only 2 business meetings and 2 workshops. So I've gotten some insight into those. I went up to a education conference last week in Orlando and went through a big vendor fair area. So I had a chance to get exposed to just a lot of different businesses that are education related, and they are stimulating some thoughts and some ideas now. Suggestions like the dual enrollment program at Fellsmere that might be useful are things that I'm looking to hear about and to be able to understand and where appropriate, try and champion them, or at least try and investigate how they work and how we can make them work better. But there are a lot of other things that, even simple, more obvious things. I ran into somebody in this fair that told me how he had a lawsuit pending with the school district, and apparently it's in appeals right now. But it was related to apparently the process in reviewing curriculum. And the backstory of this is that any committee, anyone who's empowered to do something on behalf of the board itself must also fully function under the sunshine laws, the transparency laws. Apparently, in this case, the committee that looked at the curriculum looked at a group of different options, and then they narrowed that group down, and then they presented the narrow group to the board and said, we recommend this and not that, but they didn't present the whole thing. The board did not see all the different options, but the whole process was not done under a sunshine process, so the public had no way of knowing what's going on, having input to what's going on, which is the whole point of the sunshine law. So there's a lawsuit about this, but I'm going, well, we shouldn't have that issue because, one, we should follow the law, and two is something as important as curriculum, we should be very transparent, and parents should at least be able to know what's there, be able to investigate it, find out for themselves, and have input, because there's a lot of people in the education business who really believe their titles, and they work hard, they put a lot of time and money in them, and it gives them an added amount of knowledge and understanding, but it doesn't give them everything. It doesn't make them gods. They don't get to exert their influence over others. They're supposed to use their expertise to help come to those final conclusions. Parents still need to be, one, educated, but two, involved in making those decisions. The children do belong to the parents. So yeah, I think that there's opportunities where we can improve our processes and function under the laws, and the laws are there by and large to make things better for the public. And as the school board I can't have a discussion with any of the other board members about anything, which is sort of difficult. You can't sit down and ask somebody, why do you think this, and what about that? Everything's got to be done in front of cameras and lots of people. But that same process should happen at all the committee levels, and we should be careful about following the laws. And that's something I just stumbled onto by going to this conference.
Interesting. How would you describe the political landscape stepping into the position you did at the timing you did?
Yeah, interesting question. Everyone keeps saying, and the ones who say it absolutely know that they're not being at least straightforward and honest, but to say this is a nonpartisan position, which I've always said it may be nonpartisan, but it is anything but non-political. It's highly political, and much more than I think those of us who don't have kids in school and who aren't plugged into what's going on in the school and aren't struggling as part of the process, we don't realize, how political it can be. And around here seems that it is. There's a lot of very wealthy people who live around my house up here who are older than me, who very much desire, for some reason, to have a stronger than proportional influence on what's going on in our school district. And that sort of makes you, wondering why that is, particularly since they seem to see something, very differently than I seem to see something. But it's I mean, and part of the problem is if you don't know what's going on and you can't get honest and valid information about what's going on, if you don't get two sides of the story, you're sold a bill of goods. And in Vero Beach, there's a collusion, a soft collusion amongst the various media people, and you can tell it when they run the same article and say the same things all at the same time, and they hold the same opinions. You know, I don't know why we have to have more than one if they're all going to say the same thing. But as a result of that, you get a little bit of what might be facts and news. You get a lot of what's their opinion. You don't get a lot of things that might be facts that don't agree with their opinion. So, and if you're not part of the school district, you're a taxpayer, but you're not, children in that school district, you tend to drop your guard and start to believe some of the things they tell you. And so as a result, there's sort of a cabal between the media and a group of wealthy and affluent people who seem to have a different life view than I do. But it's a tough thing to fight against because they have the influence of the media and they have a lot of money behind them, and they have for some reason a very deep desire to change what's happening with our children in our schools.
What is your opinion on, let's say, an elected official of a different governing entity either chiming in or offering opinions on, let's say, a county commissioner offering their opinion on maybe some issues in the school district? Is that something you could respect as another community leader, or is it something you like, they stay in their lane, or what?
Well, it's something I respect as a taxpayer and a citizen. Just because you're holding a position doesn't mean that you can't speak, and more importantly, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't speak. It doesn't mean that you don't have anything valuable to add. As it is, in fact, aside from the couple of media outlets, those other people are the few who have a voice slightly loud enough that they can get heard. And unless if it doesn't agree with the local media outlets, it's not going to be heard very far. So, and particularly in this town, I think that if there's something that you feel needs to be said, there are limited avenues. If somebody has a wonderful idea, if somebody in the county commission says, you know what, Fellsmill Elementary is doing terrific. Have you looked at that? And their dual enrollment program, and see how well it's working. And I'm not going to say, well, your job is roads and highways. I'm going to say thank you. As much as anyone else, either it's a good suggestion or we'll take it and decide it isn't a good suggestion. But ideas are the starts of something good to happen. If you don't hear other people's ideas, you don't ever start.
Yeah, we asked one of the county commissioners that, and I've always wondered it too, even when I ran for the county commission. And the reason it makes sense to me for the county commission to be knowledgeable of what's going on in those school board meetings with the parents and the citizens is mainly because we, as the county commission, they have the Children's Services Advisory Committee, which funnels our tax dollars to nonprofit agencies. And when I look at it, I look at, well, this agency has been working with our kids for how many years, and they're still going from 5th grade to 6th grade, and they're reading below level. So why are we using the taxpayer dollars for that? And I think, if the county commission pays closer attention to that, they might not be so quick to spend our tax dollars on nonprofits. So I think that's where that question's coming from, both of us, Mike and I, because the county commission is only involved when there's kudos for the school district, but not when the parents are there, the taxpayers are there. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I would like to see the county commission aware of what's going on, because when those NGOs are helping the school district out, we don't have any hard facts on or hard numbers. They give us data on all that they've done, but we don't have the actual name of the student. We're not following that student's history to see what the outcome is. So I'm wondering, well, is the school doing its job or not doing its job? Because the schools should be educating our kids, and they should be literate when they're leaving class, when they're ending that class and graduating to the next class. And if it's continued, there's no reason why they would be showing up to middle school way below reading level. And it affects that middle school. I remember when I worked at Oslo Middle School, we were ready to get a B grade, and then we got all this flow of sixth graders, and they were below literacy. They couldn't read at their grade level. And I'm going, well, what's going on with Learning Alliance? Aren't they working with our kids till their third grade? They couldn't have lost that much education in that time if they were literate when they were done with them in third grade. So I have a lot of questions about that, and what kind of numbers and how they're working with the school district, and if they're going to keep using our tax dollars. And to me, the school district should be able to use the money we're giving to the NGOs to funnel it right back into the school. Let's get like kids from the college that want to teach and have them do tutoring after school instead of Learning Alliance, whatever they're doing, because to me, they're not really doing that much.
Right. Well, that's, you mentioned them specifically. It's an interesting one because they've been around for 10 years, and for the first several years, the education testing levels actually dipped. And now, 10 years later, we're no higher than we were 10 years before when they started it. Now, the caveat to that is it has been improving in the last few years, but improving from a lower level, and not improving beyond where we were 10 years ago. So it does raise the question. There's some conflicts of interest there, because one of the people that sits on that committee of the county commission who votes on that is also the campaign chairman for the previous person on the seat, and the person who they're trying to replace him with in this seat. And that person was the vice chairman of the Learning Alliance. So there's a lot of incestuous interest that look a little bit questionable at best. So it's something that people should realize, that there's, it's close to $500,000 that we as a county give them, and their revenue last year, as I understand, was about $19 million. Now, if the county needs to give money and have it go to children to schools, the good news is we're starting up a foundation directly connected with the school district that enables people who want to make donations, who want to enhance our education, can do that through this foundation and fund directly to the school, and not necessarily have to go through an NGO.
Yeah, I really like that idea, because I think when we're giving our money to the NGOs, it's like money you're not tracking. And I know that the CSAC, because when I worked at Oslo Middle School, the CSAC just called and asked me, oh, is Feed the Lambs showing up? And I said, yeah, they're showing up. And I was like, well, who are you? Well, they were asking us for a grant. So we just wanted to know if they were showing up. But they never came to the school to evaluate what Feed the Lambs was doing. And at the time I wasn't sure what that call was, but now I know, now that I got more familiar with the CSAC committee. And I just think that I really don't like giving to NGOs, because they're not tracking them closely. Like if an NGO is using our students from our school, we should be able to look at the data with comparing the actual students. So this student at second grade is doing this right now. What are you working on with that student at Learning Alliance? And are they improving? So let's see their test grades. Let's see their scores. Let's see what they did at the end of the school year. We don't get that. We just get like this data, on a sheet of paper. And to me, and I've seen it, you can create data.
Right. You put the numbers together till you see ones that look good, and you emphasize those. And you're right. And the whole idea of a school board is to represent the taxpayers and the parents, to oversee what the superintendent and all of his employees are doing to help ensure that the strategy which, through the school board, that the community sets forth as what they want the schools to achieve, to make sure that strategy is actually being pursued, that there aren't alternative agendas being implemented, which I know we've seen a lot of that. I'm not necessarily saying in Vero Beach, but across the country, we've seen it a lot. I know we had issues with some political efforts that were being pushed, and to a degree we pushed back on them. But the more you get, the government out of the control of the funds, and you allow those funds to be laundered in effect through an NGO. Now, those funds don't, as you say, they don't get monitored very well. You don't have much control over them. The NGO themselves have their own agenda. They're not obligated or committed to any community, any voters. So you lose control of it, and power has a sense that as people gain it, they like to exercise. So when they find out suddenly that they can have an undue influence, in this case, children in schools, there's a strong temptation for some people to take advantage of it and have undue influence, and not in the ways that align with what the strategy and the goals are set forth by the school board. So you're right. And how does that roll out? Well, you have children who end up having to spend their time being confused on things that most of us would not say are good or even correct, and they're taking away from their education time, and they're leaving kids confused and pointed in directions that they don't even need to be pointed in. So yeah, NGOs are it's a bad habit to get into. It's bad to have a bunch of outside organizations coming in and taking controls of elements of the organization that we're spending over $300 million to try and deliver a specific service. And so you have to wonder, why do we need this NGO to do something that's our job? And why do we need to funnel, to launder the money through an NGO to get it back to the school to do what the school, generally has to do anyway? There's when you start looking at the logic and you see it doesn't seem to make sense, that usually tells you there's something else going on.
Yeah, I did some stats while back. I don't know if they're still accurate, because when I first started doing my electronic town halls, it was back in December actually. But we've got 13 elementary schools, and when I was looking at all the schools, Fellsmere had fallen a letter grade back then. And all the other schools pretty much just maintained their grade. They didn't go up in grade. What does it look like this year? And what do you have for? Have you had a chance to look at all the letter grades of the schools? Because we've got 13 elementary, 4 middle, and 2 high schools.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen the specific data. I've seen just a couple of the high level testing results that Dr. Moore has shared, and it sounds, in a land of mediocrity, it sounds hopeful. We have risen to, I guess, number 7 overall in the state of Florida, but that's for graduating 95% of our high school students, but less than 60% are at grade level for math and reading, which means 35% are being sent out into the world sort of crippled. In fact, there are colleges now run remedial courses for incoming freshmen to try and teach them what they should know before they leave high school. And the ones that don't go to college don't even get that remedial help. They're off someplace trying to get a job with minimal skills. So yeah, it's in general, it sounds promising, but if where we are right now makes us number 7, my expectation is we got to at least be number 1, because there's way too much room between where we are and where we should be. And I think a lot of it, I've looked back, and I'm getting so old now, but I look back after I got out of high school and college and saw what was starting to happen in schools, and I'm going, no, they're not going to do something like that. That's crazy. That's stupid. And then they do that, and they've done more, and they've continued to go in directions that we all think it's crazy, it's insane, it defeats the education process. So after many decades of that, guess what happens to the education process? The results, come to bear, and we aren't even teaching. And the bad news is, because I did some when I first started this, I did some research of other schools around the country, just some smattering of different school districts, and there are some that are really horrible. I think that, like in Chicago, the reading level is in the teens, and math was about the same. I think Miami was pretty low in the 30s, perhaps, or something. I looked at various different cities. So being close to 60 seemed not so good, but it's unbelievable, but it could be a lot worse. I don't think that's where Vero Beach should be and needs to be. I think we need to bring education up to education, and it shouldn't be attempt. It should be really actually accomplish an education for children. Maybe, and perhaps some of the answer might be trying to understand the individual children more. And just like one school curriculum doesn't seem to fit everybody well, perhaps one specific goal and path isn't right for every student. Maybe there's a way to try and look at individual students and determine what they need, and rather than teach the test, work with each one and try and teach them to their future. So I don't know exactly how you implement something like that, but I think that being aware of the limitations of the system, and also aware of how we're falling short of our own goals and our own testing methodology, tells us we've got to improve what we're doing and be on the lookout for other ways to do it. And if Fellsmere is a good example of that, then we should understand how and why, and figure out how we can expand.
Yeah, we've really strayed away from it. When I first started working at the school district, we had an agricultural class, and they actually had like a farm. They had like a place where they drove the students to, where they farmed, and they had like cows and stuff. And then most of those kids would go to UF when they graduated. But we definitely need to get back to skills, because there's a lot of kids that, like boys, for example, that might, or some girls, but mostly boys, that have ADHD, or they think they have ADHD. It's just these kids, they should have been born on a farm, where they're busy, they're digging, they're cleaning, they like to be busy, and to sit still is really difficult for them. So understanding the child is really, really important. My own son was one of those kids. I remember going to his classroom to visit, and I'm like, why is he sitting in the corner? And she's like, because when people walk by his desk, they would knock his stuff off, and he was frustrated, so he wanted to go sit in the corner. Another time I walked into the classroom, and he didn't have a chair at his desk, and I was like, did he get in trouble? She's like, no, he doesn't like to sit down, so I allow him to put his chair in the corner until he needs it. And so she was always flexible with his personality, and he never was in trouble. But when the teachers were putting so many expectations on him, like in high school, he was losing his hair a little bit at a young age, and he wanted to wear his hat all the time, his little baseball cap. He would get in trouble for it, and I'm like, why are we picking on him over his baseball cap, But school has rules. You can't have a baseball cap on your head. So he would catch an attitude every once in a while when he was embarrassed about his hair. He's going through puberty, So I think it's really nice when people can see that each child is different, and when you set the rules and standards and stuff for kids and the school, it should be kind of relatively to what a normal kid is. Things that not over regulating the kids, but also understanding how each kid learns, and having those options in the schools. I just don't think we have a lot of options anymore. We've gotten away from it. Like, I ran into Air Docs. Air Docs has a great program for high schoolers, because they have an online program that you actually could turn into a class, and it teaches it has levels of certificates that they can earn, so that when they're old enough in high school, they can actually go work for Air Docs. That's an air conditioning company.
Yeah, they call me every month.
I told them about, I ran into them when I was running for county commission, and I told them I would try to pass that information on to school board members, which I have, but nobody has ever done anything. And I told them I would love to see their program in the high school, because there's not everybody's set to go to college. You know?
Well, and actually, I was at the graduation for the technical school, and there was a handful of young men and young women who were graduating with a air conditioning degree, and preparing them to get out and work in the community. And I know it's important, because when I try and get my air conditioner fixed, it's sometimes hard to get somebody around. So they're needed. And the other thing, which I don't know that we've even begun to try and investigate, but in a world that continues to change, the next 20 years is going to change a heck of a lot, even the next 10 years. And so we need to start anticipating what this whole AI thing is going to do to all kinds of careers in our entire country and our world, and see what we can anticipate towards that. But, things that require, at least still require physical hands and physical capabilities are jobs that are, good jobs and relatively secure, and they'll probably be considered better jobs, when administrative jobs tend to disappear. So we need to start thinking forward 5 and 10 years, and even 20 years, because that's when these kids are out in the workforce, and try and help anticipate what those changes are going to be and prepare them for.
In that kind of subject, looking towards the future, considering what we see on the national stage, is that part of the consideration when we're anticipating what these kids might have to face in the real world? And what would your opinion be on the turmoil politically on the national stage right now? How is that affecting us at our level?
Did you have a specific turmoil in mind?
The biggest thing in the news right now is the former president being convicted on 34 felonies, and what most people believe a sham trial. What is your opinion? I'll give you that opportunity. If you don't want to answer or offer an opinion on national politics, I understand that. But, is this all part of our consideration for our children's future? And do you think their future looks bright?
Well, a good question. I have to withhold myself from offering my opinions on all kinds of politics, because I've determined that I'm the only person who really knows the answer. But I have to keep that to myself sometimes. But because everyone else seems to think the same thing. But I do agree that you look at what happened and you're going, have we gone crazy? Have we just gone crazy to do things that are completely outside of the normal parameters of our legal system, and to not just do it once, but with a particular person, do it repeatedly and do it everywhere you possibly can. And there are no honest people around who are not scratching their heads saying this is not right. And no one in the world has been treated this way. No one in the world should be treated this way. But you have to understand that now somebody has. More and more of us will be treated that same way. And if they can pull a jury together and say, here's a couple possible crimes, all you get together and you decide if this person broke or committed any of these groups of crimes, and you don't have to agree on anything, just come back and say, we think that he's a criminal, and we'll throw them in jail. And I don't think any of us could necessarily survive 12 people from a very different worldview who are not going to use the opportunity to persecute us and use their worldview as a replacement for the Constitution and the laws. So that's the whole point of the law and the Constitution behind it. And as we see it no longer being upheld evenly and dispensed consistently, we realize that if they can do it to those people, they can also do it to us. And there is an intentional design behind that we're supposed to get that message. We're supposed to get the message that, you can go out and riot and you can burn down buildings and you can cause all kinds of chaos if you know, those of us who have the microphones and maybe the political gavel at the time, if you agree with us, we will do nothing. If somebody else does that, or even a lot less than that, but we don't agree with you, we will persecute you mercilessly. That's the message we're supposed to get, and then the end result is we're supposed to shut up and let them decide what we should think and feel. And that's what we're seeing happen. So that's the message, and that's the direction currently that we're flowing as a nation. So the question is, relative to schools, how do we get that? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the 40 years, 50 years of what I've seen, and we've all seen happen in the education system. That things are happening now that when I went to one of the foremost liberal colleges in the country, because I happen to live in that state, and they would never have dreamed of doing, many of the things that are now commonplace. It's just, but you see 40 years of quote unquote educating a teaching class to think a certain way and implement that worldview. And a large part of that is not trying to implement something that works, something that has been proven for centuries to work. And when we went, they taught us to read and write and math and arithmetic. And then in the 70s and 80s, they said, well, no, that worked real well for all these years. We have to teach it a different way. We have to approach it a different way. And so we've done that. And the problem is science says when you have a great experiment, you put your parameters down, you put it on paper. Every time something dumb is done, it causes problems. Like, just to use as an example, when the current president came in and said, I think we're going to shut down all the progress that was made on oil and gas pipelines and things, and what a great thing that is. Well, when gas prices skyrocketed and oil prices skyrocketed, and not that many people were willing to look back and say, how did this happen? Well, it happened because the conscious decision and intention was to do things that was going to cause that. And we have to look at cause and effect. So we have to look at cause and effect with our schools and say, what did we do in the 50s that we stopped doing in the 70s and 80s and 90s that caused what we have now in the outcomes from our schools? And that's why I think a lot of people want to go back to a classical education, because that did work for thousands of years. And it didn't have a lot of embedded agendas and worldviews. And those are the kinds of things that, like I say, even if the child is wise enough to be able to think through and draw their own opinion and not be bullied by someone who's trying to enforce their opinion upon them, they still lose hours of the day sitting through that. And it's going on today. My niece had that experience this year up in college. That she's taking psychology courses, and they said, well, they got to tell you that if you're analyzing this person, you have to have this worldview. You got to say this thing. If they think they've got this, you don't believe it, but you got to say it, because that's the corporate stance in the medical industry, driven by our current administration, and you got to go along with it. And so she's saying, it's tough. I know what the wrong answer is. I know what the right answer is. I put the right answer down, and I lose points in my test scores because I didn't answer it the way they want to pretend the answers. So it's going on today. You see it. And one of my desires would be to try and root out those things that are not causing education, and also root out those things which are subtle worldviews that are being imposed.
Yeah, the high school used to have a debate class back when I first started working for the high school. And those debate classes are really good because it's a time to teach the kids how to do their research and how to use persuasive speech. Because debates shouldn't be about calling names and putting people down and just having an emotion over how you feel about something. It's more of okay, you want to talk about this subject, and if you don't agree with it, what makes you not agree with it? It takes them to that educational level of do your research, come back and use persuasive speech. You're not going to get somebody to listen to you by just ranting and raving. And I think that really needs to come back for the students, but you need to have a really good teacher that's going to teach it. I would love to see that come back, because that's what colleges should have been doing a long time, learning how to, when you go and take writing in college, you got to learn how to write persuasively. You got to learn how to write, for instructions. I remember taking those earlier classes where you had to learn how to write different ways. And we should be doing that at the high school level too, as well. And,
right.
It's...
I'm not sure they're doing that in colleges.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're doing it anymore anywhere. It seems like everybody's so angry all the time, and the communication for the kids is not there. Like even in the younger years, the kids they don't have that skill to communicate. And I don't know if the classroom sizes are too big, maybe, because the way the kids are these days are much more different than we were. I remember in the 70s, I remember when they tried to change our math and go from inches to centimeters. I remember that. And then I remember my teacher, she would hit you with the ruler if you were misbehaving. And, in our younger grades, it's like, and that was public school. That wasn't Catholic school. That was public school. So I remember kids sitting in the corner in the classroom. There was discipline in the classroom. I don't feel like the teachers have that support anymore. And the parents, and working at the school district, I think the schools should have a policy that if a parent is going to come in with her spaghetti straps and no bra on and her nipples pointed out like darts, and she needs to leave the lobby and go and come in presentable. And parents cannot be, and the police and the SRO should escort every parent out of the building the minute they start yelling and screaming and pointing their fingers at staff and having a tantrum. And I feel like that kind of atmosphere happens at the schools because I saw it when I was there, and the school's afraid to deal with the parents, it seems to me. And the teachers feel that way too when it comes to discipline. They try to discipline the kids, but when all the years that I worked at the school district, discipline was inconsistent, and certain kids were treated a certain way, and other kids, some of them were used as examples, and it has to be consistent for every kid. You maybe approach the kid differently, but look, if you've got a kid that did this and this is the consequence, you might have to explain the consequence to him a little differently, but he should suffer the same consequence that the other kid would suffer. The other kid, you might explain it to him differently, but they should still suffer the same consequence for the same action and not be coddled because they're on a 504 and they throw tantrums. It's like, no, like I worked with special needs kids. You still had expectations for your special needs kids, and you had to be consistent and routine so they would learn it, but you just didn't give in because they had a special need. You still worked with them, and I don't, working at the school district, not everybody got the same consequences. And that's a real turnoff for teachers, because they're like, well, who's supporting me in my classroom? So I don't know. There's a lot of issues I know that the school has, and you have a lot of political issues like the desegregation. I still don't understand the desegregation thing, because out of all the years that I've worked at the school district, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, our school district is so diverse. I don't see any racism or black people not being in the right positions. It's all merit, and it's all how the numbers too. I've been very confused over that desegregation because I actually worked at the school district and I was like, we are very diverse. What in the world are they talking about? As a matter of fact, they've moved more of the kids out of Gifford, which is, predominantly a black neighborhood, and all those kids are going to the schools where they're predominantly white neighborhoods. So what are you guys talking about desegregation? I can pull out my kid's yearbook and show you that he's in a predominantly black neighborhood and the yearbook is full of predominantly white kids. So I'm like, what is the desegregation order doing? I don't get it. To me, I don't know what NAACP is arguing about, because when I looked at the teachers, all the different types of teachers that are on campus, it's a diverse group. When I look at the students, I'm like, it's diverse. Plus, they've been moving the kids out of their own district into other districts. So I don't understand where all this stuff is coming from, because when I worked there, it was very, very diverse. And even in areas, I was like, you go to Gifford, there's a bunch of rich kids going to Gifford. But Gifford Middle School is located in a really a neighborhood that's struggling. I'm not afraid to say it. It is like, I remember when I got on the bus to go out to Gifford, I was like, where are we going? I went from my nice neighborhood in, Vero Beach, and then I'm being driven into this neighborhood, and I'm going, why is that house all, what's happened to this neighborhood? This is where my kid's school's going to be? So I'm so confused at why the NAACP has a case with the school and what this desegregation order is. I'm like, it makes no sense. I mean, if you look at the yearbooks and look at all the students in the yearbooks and in the classrooms, it's like, what are you guys talking about?
Well, we look at the progress in the desegregation order. We're in the process at a point in time now where the group of the NAACP and the school board was given a charge that they had to sit down, find, place out a map going forward as to what needs to be accomplished, which would determine that we've achieved that. And so the process of having mapped that out, of going through and agreeing to the fact that those processes are in place and they're being pursued, and that the school board has achieved that status, it's because of the way the court order currently sits. It's the responsibility of the two parties to jointly agree. And if you look at Israel and Hamas right now, if you have to get both of them to agree before something happens to your favor, you're going to put all the chips you've got down on the table, and you're going to use those to try and leverage a much better result than the situation might dictate. So it's not inconsistent that somebody would say, I don't want just this result. I want this result plus something further, because I've got chips on the table that say I can try and do that. So it doesn't get resolved until both sides come to the conclusion that they're going to acknowledge that we've achieved that and end this process. Both sides have to want the end more than they want to have the current process. And it's either that, or you have to go back to a judicial system that doesn't want to step in and make a controversial decision either way. So it's sort of a quagmire right now. That's why it made a whole lot of sense, after having several years of one person on that committee from the board, to have a different board member who might possibly be able to change the dynamics and bring a different perspective and a different maybe independence to the process. And I hope that that by putting Jackie Rosario in that place, that we might be able to see some progress where we haven't for a while. Relative to the other things you spoke of, the more root cause of everything that you discussed about schools is things like discipline and respect and support. And I think we have a lot of great teachers, probably some that aren't perfect, because we're human, but it seems like we have a plethora of great teachers, hardworking, trying to do the job well, facing a difficult situation. And because of our culture, our nature, and the way that things have gone, teachers no longer, not only do they feel supported, but I don't think they always feel safe with the lack of discipline in our culture, in our homes, the lack of authority and tools to impose and maintain discipline. You've got borderline anarchy at times. And as children are smart, they figure out, if I can get away with this and I feel like getting away with it, I'm going to do it. And as we've seen in our society, when you try and do something which is absurd and you get away with it, you start saying, what other absurd thing can I do and get away with? And we're seeing that across our country now. People are doing absurd things because they got away with absurd things, and they want to do more absurd things. And as long as consequences are not connected to actions, people are going to continue making bad decisions. And that filters down to our schools ultimately, because our teachers are dealing with children. Mm-hmm. And it's bad enough dealing with adults. And then you're on these college campuses where supposedly these are young adults, and they're acting like children. So what are children would act like? It's a tough place to be a teacher because we don't have the infrastructure in terms of support and discipline and culture that we used to have. And a lot of it goes back to households. Families that have strong discipline at home, those children are going to come into class with that kind of discipline. And they're going to encounter children that don't have that kind of discipline, and they're going to learn the opposite. And they're going to see that those kids get away with it. And that's a sort of an invitation for them to test their wings. And it's a bad process. But the first step is realizing that what it is and what it shouldn't be. And we do have, as you mentioned, the idea of rhetoric. My campaign manager's son, he was in debate before they moved here, and he wanted to continue debate. Well, they didn't have debate here. So his father hired a tutor from down in West Palm Beach area, who tutored him in debate. And so he became quite good at it. He went to competitions, and I think it was the best in the state. Was following competition, he was number 4 in the country. He actually won against his tutor who taught him. So he became an excellent debater. And the thing about, and that's what the classical education model builds up towards rhetoric, to be able to know how to speak. And how to speak, you got to think, and think logically. So since we don't teach that, we don't teach anything, we have devolved into, as you said, emotions and bullying and victimology is how people pursue their viewpoint or their agenda. And nobody sits down and says, well, what about this and what about that? It's, you're a racist, you're a bum, you're a something, you're a this. And it's whoever you can bully or you can claim that you're a victim of something. Those are now what has supplanted the idea of logic and reason and rhetoric and intellectual discussion. And we need to, if we don't provide children with that, we can't expect them to go to college and apply that. So the outcropping of what we see 15 years later comes from what we give to our students while they're here in their formative ages. So that's why something like classical education can be so valuable. But just the idea of having debate was good. Unfortunately, not that many kids end up in debate class, but it does give you some children who can think logically and speak well and develop them into important roles in society. But I guess the first step is realizing that where we are and where we shouldn't be. And we're a long way away from teaching students to have intelligent, calm, rational discussions, respectful discussions. And with that, the respect and the discipline and the information and the intellect that will serve them not only in their lives, but serves them in a community to become part of a community of civilized and cultured people rather than a community of mob bullying and winning by force.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially with teachers, because we have a lot of really great teachers working for the school district. I mean, you have some that, are questionable, but overall, they want to teach. That's why they went to school to teach, because they love working with kids. They love seeing that like light bulb go off in the kid's head, but they're getting hampered with all of these other things, social, emotional stuff, psychological stuff, and they just want to go in there and teach and be creative. And some of these professional developments, some of the teachers will tell you that was a waste of my time. We really need to focus. And I was wondering, would it help because of the way the kids are today? They have less discipline, they have less attention span. Can we still function with 24 kids in a classroom? You can function with more kids in a classroom when they all have a good attention span, but the kids today, they really don't have a long attention span. And to me, it seems like maybe we should be thinking about smaller classroom sizes, and more teachers. Smaller classroom sizes so that you can focus more on the individuals. And if you have one or two that are disrupting, you can handle it. But when you have a class of 24 and you have 4 in there disrupting it, that really takes away from the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, it'd be wonderful. I mean, we were at Wabasso School, and they've got almost a one-on-one ratio for young students who need that just to function, but it's an expensive model. It would take I think we're at about a 17-to-1 ratio now, but if we took that down down to like 12-to-1, that would mean 50% more teachers. And teachers are in the major part of our operating costs, so that's a huge explosion in cost that would have to be covered someplace. So, while the idea of greatly expanding the number of teachers relative to the number of students is a financial challenge, always in consideration, but it'd be good to go back to, maybe we can fix the problem without having to throw teachers at it. Because if the problem is in the discipline and the self-control and the organization within the classroom, adding more teachers to augment that problem probably is the best way. The best way would be is if we can improve the discipline, and if we can improve the respect level, and you have to do that by first having teachers who are trained and empowered to do that, but also administration that's going to, that encourages that and is going to stand behind that, and then a community and parents that also see the value of that. And if the whole community desires that and seeks that and works towards that, that can happen. And the benefits of that, as we talked about, are tremendous. To have children who grow up and they learn rather than be distracted, that they're fulfilled. One of the pieces to that puzzle is, I think children who don't feel interested, fulfilled, obviously they don't, their attention isn't there in the classroom. We want to find ways to better reach those children who aren't, whose attentions are straying. But I think we at least recognize that those are the areas where we have problems that are resulting in this kind of a discipline and development result. And we, as administration, want to move that way. But in conjunction with our parents and families and our larger society, we have to, as a whole, want to see that kind of progress made and that kind of improvement made. And I don't know yet whether we have an avenue to get that kind of consensus among our community. When you've got a media that just goes beyond sanity about things that make no sense, a media that was responsible and a media that was wise and concerned could be a powerful force. And the voice that's heard above all other voices is the voice that tends to lead. And unfortunately, media now makes money on clicks and on eyeballs, and there's not a lot of reward for them to do the right thing because conflict sells. So they don't really want to they're not motivated to establish unity. They're motivated to have camps, and to pick a group and just like back in Nazi Germany, you pick a group and you demonize them, and we line up against them, and we all focus on squashing the other group, and it distracts us from everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
And there's that effort to continually distract by picking a target group and demonizing them and slandering them in whatever way you can. If that's the voice in our society, that's the way our media speaks on behalf of us, and people are willing to accept that, I don't know how our culture is going to change much from there.
Would you consider our local media guilty of that also?
I thought I was talking about the local.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
Kevin, I wanted to ask you, where are we at with the Title IX?
Well, the resolution went forward. Apparently, we're the second ones in the state that have passed that. Sarasota passed that, and actually, the text for our resolution is basically the same as the Sarasota text. So there's now, I don't know of any others, but there are now 2 school boards that have stood up and said, we're going to stand with the governor, who's absolutely right in saying, you folks are absolutely crazy, and we're going to fight that as much as we can. I told the story, and I got another story. I told the story at the board meeting, and I'll expand on the story. A young 20-year-old pretty relative of mine who was up in college, I told you about her before, the psychology student. They called her a couple weeks ago. Actually, she called us 2 weeks ago, I think it was. No more than 3 weeks ago. She said, you might have to come up here and get me out of jail. I said, why is that? She said, well, because they've made 3 attempts to put this person into my dorm room, and this person who identifies as a woman is a 200-pound guy. I did some research on Facebook and discovered the girl's not a guy, and it is actually a guy, and I don't want this man in my room with me, living with me. And so she keep pushing back, but they keep giving her pressure. And the good part was there's only a couple of weeks left in school. But then I find out later, talking to her in the past week, that her room is adjoining another room, and they have a shared bathroom. And the girl who lives in the room next to her has decided to identify as a boy, but her boyfriend identifies as a girl and lives with her in that room. And they have a shared bathroom, and she can't lock the bathroom door from her side. So at night, she has to go in and lock from the inside of the bathroom, lock their door, so he can't come through the door into her room at night. And then she gets woken up often in the middle of the night to get up and unlock the door if somebody wants to go to the bathroom. But that's the world she's being forced to live in, because people in this world are nuts, absolutely nuts. So thank goodness we have a governor who's fighting back and who's not allowing boys to wander into girls' locker room. I mean, if I were a kid in junior high school, I probably would have thought this was a great idea at the time because I was a junior high school kid. But as an adult, even as a kid, I knew it was right. But I can see where kids might say, "Hey, if I want to say I'm a girl, I can go into the girls' locker room. That's easy." I mean, they're doing it in prison now. They're going to men who are being sentenced, and they're saying, "Well, now I identify as a woman." They're being put in women's prison, and now women are getting pregnant in prison. I mean,
yeah, I can tell you.
Well, that's crazy.
Yeah, well, I'm a father of 3. My oldest is my son. He's going to be 11 in September, but my 2 youngest are girls, and both of them will soon be in the elementary school. One already is, and I'm scared to death. I'm scared to death of sending any one of them on to middle school or high school, never mind college. With everything you see going on and what's considered acceptable, it is pretty frightening. As a parent, I'll tell you that.
Well, I've said this, I didn't make it up, but I've heard it and I've repeated it a number of times. Bad things happen when good people do nothing. And you look around, you see all the bad things. Everything you look around that's just not just maybe this isn't good, but this is absolutely bad, evil, and crazy. And you look around, you see it happening. There are good people who did nothing that enabled that.
I agree with you, and I always reference the Holocaust, because it was ordinary people who held the door and pointed out their neighbors, because it was what was expected of them. It was it was their society at the time, and it's sad to see contradicting names of what the mission is of some of these groups out there, but I see it locally too. Just in the books, I don't see any logic in why some of these groups would oppose challenging books just to question them in the first place. Not even banning them, but just to question them. I question the motive of some of these people and the integrity, for sure.
So yeah, as we should. You look at the actions, and that don't watch the lips, watch the actions. It's like in basketball, you don't watch the ball, you watch the players' hips. The hips are going to tell them where you're going, and their actions tell you what they're really up to. And when you see their actions going one way and the words go another way, that's telling you something too. I actually ran into a person who was a media specialist who was outraged that the school board might have input as to what books shouldn't and shouldn't be in the library. And it was a very eye-opening discussion. This person said, well, you've got teachers and librarians that have advanced degrees and they're so smart and they're experts and everything. And so who do you think should decide which books are in the school? Should it be the teachers, or should it be the parents, or should it be the school board? I said, well, start off with the parents are the customer. And he was outraged. He said, no, they aren't. The students are the customer. I said, no, actually, the parents are the customer. And at that point, he stormed off. But one of my goals is we are in a competitive business now. It isn't this hierarchical, monolithic, you got no choice organization anymore. You got choice. And that's why we lost 840 students, because parents are able to choose. And children are not our customers. Children are the product. The customer is the one who gets to decide whether you get the money or not. And parents are deciding not to give you the money, and they're walking away.
Yeah,
and it's costing the school district. And it should. If you can't understand your customer and do it to your customer before it's like I hate my internet company, but it's the only one that I can get here in my house. But the day that I get choice, I'm making that choice.
right.
And now the parents have the choice; they're going to make them, and you can't treat customers that way anymore.
Yeah, and that too often they forget about the parent. And I'm very glad to hear about the Title IX, because I'm just waiting for, Riley Gaines lost to a man, but there's first, second, and third place. Is society going to wait till there's a man standing on first, second, and third place before they wake up?
Well, the ones who have this worldview and who have brought it to this point, don't count on them waking up. They will be cheering. They will be cheering. When everybody on the girls' team is a boy, they will be cheering and ecstatic. Don't expect them suddenly to gain logic and wisdom and rationality. As I said before, the whole world works on consequences. When you separate consequences from actions, there is no other barrier to bad choices and bad actions. And for people who want to do bad actions, that's an open window. But for people who don't know any better, consequences are what teach us better. And if there is no consequence, if there was no consequence to boys and girls into girls' bathrooms, and there's no consequence in boys and girls sports, and no consequence in boys and girls locker rooms, and no consequence in boys and girls dorm rooms, if there are no consequences, then it will flourish and continue. And it's not just, there are consequences, but the ones making the decisions aren't the ones paying the consequence. And as long as somebody else feels the pain, pays the price, you are encouraging bad decisions and future bad actions. And as a child, you grow up saying, "Wow, Mom said I can't do this. Don't grab the M&Ms," but I grabbed the M&Ms. I ate them all, and I'm loving that because there was the bad consequence of that. Well, the M&Ms were supposed to be for somebody else. Now somebody else doesn't get them because I exerted my will, but I don't care because the consequences didn't hurt me. And that's sort of the way our society is functioning now. A big chunk of our society functions with the idea that they can do whatever they want, and since there have been no consequences, what they're doing must be right. People who don't know right from wrong, they determine right from wrong as to whether they pay a particular cost for their actions. And that kind of thinking, if there is no cost to them, that kind of thinking will flourish, and those kinds of actions will flourish because it's what we're teaching them. You can do what you want because you won't pay the consequence. That's why people like spending government money. They don't feel it coming out of their own wallet. And they envision it coming out of somebody else's wallet. So it's spend, baby, spend.
So, Kevin, as a school board member, like you said, you guys can't really talk and share ideas unless you're at a school board meeting or an open public meeting. So, like, what do some people don't really know what your place is and how you affect the decisions that go on in the school, or what influence you have over Dr. Moore and any superintendent that's in there. So because there's a lot of changes that you're talking about that we agree with that need to happen, how does that all play in with all the members and the superintendent?
Well, we're like one of those Transformers or whatever that kid show was, where everybody comes together and they fist bump and all of a sudden they get power. School boards as individual people really don't have much power and authority. I mean, I can go into any school, I can go and look at things, I can gather information, but I don't have a power to directly exert influence or make decisions aside and apart from the other four board members. So as a board together, the board entity is the only one who really has power and authority. But as a board, our role is to first select a superintendent. That's somebody that the board picks, and they employ that person. That person reports to them. So because they report to them, the major part of the board's job is to oversee the function of the school and the superintendent, make sure that they are on track, help guide them. It's not, you don't really want to persecute your employee. You want to help them, and if they're a little off track, you want to help them stay on track, because their success is your success. You want them to be successful, and you want to share in that. And if we don't give good guidance, then we can't expect much in return. So we need to have oversight, have enough input, information to give input and have oversight, and yet to build the trust. Because as much as I know of Dr. Moore, I'm extremely impressed with what he's done and what we have here and his abilities. But even the best tennis players and golfers have coaches to help them stay on track and improve their game. So a big part of our role is to coach and oversee what that superintendent is doing. The other part of the job is to create a strategy and policies, which are the day-to-day guidelines for that superintendent, and which that superintendent takes out and distributes throughout all of the schools and their employees. So we have to make wise policies, see where policies need to be changed, improved, or somehow updated, and then make sure that what we're doing continues to line up with the policies and the strategy and the goals that we're holding forth. So it's really an oversight role. It's not being the expert on the minutia of education. It's being well-rounded and well-informed on everything that's going on around the school. So you get bits and pieces of evidence that say, this is working, this is on track. Hey, this policy we did had an unexpected outcome. We need to see what we need to do to change that. Things are changing in the country and the nation. We have to be able to respond to that and to figure out how to protect or fulfill our roles with the school board. But it's different than being a teacher. We tend to have, you tend to get teachers on school boards because they realize, that's the authority that oversees their role, and they want to fill that authority. And it's good to have an educator or two who can bring that viewpoint, the viewpoint of our employees, who are instrumental in delivering the services that we provide. But you also don't want to have the employees in charge of the whole function, because a skilled teacher who knows how to teach is, generally speaking, not going to be skilled in other areas which are necessary in order to be administrating and particularly to be overseeing a school. And if you have a person who does have that skill, they also are part of that culture. And we've talked about a little bit about what the teaching culture has been indoctrinated with for decades. And so they're influenced by the culture of the teaching organization and even the teachers union, often more than they're being influenced by the concerns of the parents and the taxpayers, who ultimately are our customers. So they're not necessarily trained up to be customer relationship types of people from an administrative standpoint. They do a great job as parents and things, but it's a different job. And so we need to have a mix of different kinds of people. It's unfortunate the board is only 5, because it's not a lot of people. My board, we had 9, and we had a goal of always being at least at 12, could be up to 15, so that you have different viewpoints. Each person does not have an overriding influence, and what one person lacks, another person brings. But unfortunately, we have only 5, so it brings a certain kind of dynamic in terms of doing that. There are fewer people to have that oversight, to know what's going on. But it's helpful. And unfortunately, we do have one candidate in the race who does have children in school, because the rest of us don't have children who are in the school. Jackie has children, but they're not in the school, the public schools. The others don't have any children. My predecessor didn't have any children. So there's an element of insight into what it's like being a parent that a parent gets that, I can only get secondhand. But the mix of everybody is important, and the real job is to make policies, oversee, and make sure we stay on the right track.
I love that you refer to the parents as customers, because I used to do that too when I was at the school district. I would call them the customers.
It helps understand. I mean, you don't want to say that if you don't want them being the ultimate driver of what's going on.
Yeah.
If you want to be the ultimate driver, you don't like customers. You go to FP&L, and they don't care about customers. You're attached to our service. We can flip the switch and turn you off if we want. But you don't get the best service then either.
Yeah. What I did want to ask you, though, is how do you feel about zero tolerance policies?
Well, I try and usually separate feelings from facts and opinions. So zero tolerance is great when it's something that shouldn't be tolerated. Not so good when something should be tolerated. I think that anything overdone is overdone. I mean, you had literally stories of children making an image of a gun out of a piece of bread and being thrown out of school. That's obviously doesn't make any sense. On the other hand, I just saw a note that there was somebody at I think it was Oslo School yesterday or the day before. There was a report of somebody making a written threat of violence towards the school, in the middle school, and the FBI is involved. They're looking into it. I think that a little bit of rationality is always appropriate, but I guess the answer is you should have policies, you should have procedures, you should have rules and things, and those rules should be measured against the child, in this case a child or the teacher or whoever's breaking the policy, and they should be dealt with appropriately. The appropriate consequence should be not for punishment so much as to bring learning. And if you have an action and an appropriate consequence does not come back to that action will not only recur, but it's being taught to the others that observe it. So, particularly in children and young children, you don't want to punish, but you do want to educate them, just like you do in any other topic. You have to educate them in the idea of discipline and following rules and understanding, actions and consequences. Those are possibly more important than reading and writing, because you might be able to get by without doing great math, but if you don't have self-discipline, you're not going to be employable, and you're going to be a lousy neighbor. And I don't want you on my street, and you're probably going to end up in jail. So it's that important of a thing to teach and understand and reinforce actions and consequences, and obviously when there's threat or danger involved, that has to be taken very seriously. Because as we've seen, when we were growing up, you didn't have kids running around with rifles. You had kids with rifles, they would never consider shooting anybody. Now they think, wow, this seems like a fun thing. Everyone gets to do it. So we have to take a different approach to physical threat in the schools that we did 30, 40 years ago. You have to take that seriously. But I think that's why we have humans as judges. They're supposed to be able to weigh factors and with a little bit of mercy and justice, apply the consequences within some parameters to the actions that are happening. And there should be that kind of variability in any kind of a rule or system. And I think wisdom has to be applied to the classroom as much as anything, but we should be approaching it with the idea of how do we make this an education moment, not just for that one child, but for the other children that know about it.
Right, I agree with you. I was curious how you would respond to that, because I worked in discipline on the school when I worked for the school district as well. That was one of the areas that I also worked, and I did see a lot of different students. But I also did see, like, when I hear zero tolerance, what concerns me is it depends who's dealing with that students. I have seen zero tolerance be used inappropriately. Like, it's like you're ruining that kid's life right now, and the charges that you're putting on him, it really wasn't, the kid's never been in trouble except for an argument here and there. But I think it's just so delicate when they put zero tolerance in the schools, the what do you call it, the discipline manual, because it depends who's running, who the principal is or who the assistant principal is. They all, sometimes they target a kid and they use it on that kid. Not all the time, but I can say that I've seen it used to make an example of a kid. And it always makes me worry, because kids are supposed to make certain mistakes in their lives and learn from them, like you said. So I'm just wishy-washy with that when it comes to the zero tolerance. But you gave a really good, discussion on it and shared your thoughts on it, because it always concerns me, like, these kids are already going to have it tough if they're not like really criminal kids. I can see where you've got a kid that's, threatened, that's brought knives to schools, or he's even got a record outside of school, where you might want to consider the zero tolerance for certain things. But sometimes they just use it. It's almost like the lawfare we're seeing. It says this, so that means I can give you the max. You know what I mean? And that just worries me when it's put in a manual and it's not, doesn't have specific verbiage. It can be used in any way. Almost like if you're at a football game and you disrupt you have like an argument, and it's a loud argument, they can arrest you for disruption of a school event, instead of talking with the kids and doing some other alternative measure of punishment. It depends who that person is that's handling that power.
I've always thought that 2 and 3 and maybe 4-word little themes are almost always bad. You know, zero tolerance, you know, DEI, you know, racism. And you get a lot of these things with 2 or 3 words that you don't have enough words for there to have real meaning behind them and parameters enough to be significant. And they use that to twist the meanings of the words to match something that the words aren't even intended to mean. That's why I love discussions like this, where a more lengthy and specific answer actually lays down some communication and some parameters to some ideas and fleshes them out, rather than zero tolerance thing means is crazy. The whole concept of tolerance, if you stop and look at it, tolerance is the degree to which variability may exist and the mechanisms still function. It's an engineering term. When you make a gear, you have a little bit of tolerance in there, and if it's too much, the machine won't function or last long. If it's too little, it won't run. Zero tolerance. If you made a machine with zero tolerance, the machine would not function, because you have to have play in everything to allow things to interact. So the idea should never be zero tolerance. It's tight tolerances. You specify the tolerances. In engineering, you say you can have a tolerance of 0.333 millimeters to 0.335 millimeters. That's your avenue. Within that, you have tolerance. When you get beyond that, the mechanism starts to fail. Same thing with school. You say, well, the tolerance is you just can't have a gun on campus. But if you yell at some kid above 75 decibels, that doesn't mean we're going to throw you in jail or we're going to kick you out of school. But if you do that every day, maybe it does. The tolerance is not being, like many words in our society nowadays, tolerance is an abused word. It means pretty much the opposite that most people use it for. Tolerance means allowing variation within a functional parameter. So to try and pretend that the world's going to work with only one parameter and everyone has to adhere to that probably is not going to be a well-functioning student or classroom or school district.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. I really appreciate that. It's been a very good discussion with you. Mike, do you have anything you want to ask Kevin?
No, I just want to thank him, and I look forward to seeing more of his work on the school board and more conversations. I look forward to having with you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and I welcome yours and anyone else's ideas and input. You can always rule out a less than ideal idea, but if no one raises the idea, it never has a chance. So I tend to try and consider everything and understand it, and most of my good ideas come from somebody else. So if you have insights, if you see things, if there are things that might possibly be improved or might be learned from, like the Fellsmere School, thank you so much for taking the time to share that, because with only 5 school board members, most of our eyes and ears are the parents around the community.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with that new school and the classical education. I really, really want to see the grades, kids graduating at 95% literacy for math and reading and writing, because those are so important.
Right. Now, I will say that I'll add the caveat, probably will tend to happen because magnet schools and charter schools, parents who sort of select themselves out for pursuing that particular school are probably going to be parents who are also a little bit more involved and interested and aware and rounded parents and interacting with their children. So you've got a healthy base that's probably going to help you get into that school. And I say that because the comparison is not everyone has that kind of home or that kind of parents or parents with that kind of time and opportunity to have that involvement. So classical ed is great for certain kids. Other kids in other situations may not do even as well in that situation. That's why having some choice and the second thing is trying to find ways to help encourage our parents and even instruct or guide parents so that they can be good parents for those students and participate in the success of those students in school. The more that happens, a student with a mediocre teacher but great parents is probably going to do better than the opposite. So we got great teachers, we need great parents as well to really come out with successful students.
Again, thank you. Before we go, I don't want to forget, I do want to ask you, if people want to support you in this upcoming election, what's the best way they can do that, and how can they get in touch with your campaign?
Thanks for asking. I have an email, electkevinmcdonald@gmail.com. I have a website, oddly enough, it's Elect Kevin McDonald. And you can go to the website, you can get more information. You can contact me via email. We still accept for those that feel they can afford to and want to make a financial contribution. That's valuable because what we discovered is like 53% of the votes are going to come by mail. Many people outside the city and the state. So it's sort of expensive to reach all those voters by mail. And my competitor, who, as I mentioned, is, he just recently stepped down from the NGO that we were talking about. That's his main interest, is that NGO, apparently. He hasn't done anything to really campaign other than showed up at 3 different forums. But he's put in an enormous amount of money. He put in, out of his own pocket, probably more money than we're going to be able to spend, and then he got some wealthy neighbors to put in that same amount of money. So we're up against an enormous amount of money. They're going to, really saturate those absentee voters, and they're going to use media to instead of doing the personal effort to go out and meet with people and get petitions signed and be in activities and things. So he's got an advantage, and if people feel that they can make a financial contribution, we'll give it back to you by mailing you lots of times, or at least once.
Yeah, that's very true. Just the mailers alone will cost you, probably several $1,000s, and then the media.
15,000, we're guessing.
Yeah, if you want to do the radio show, that's a little over. I did it during my campaign, and it was around $1,300, $1,500, something like that. So we don't, we hate to say that it costs money to run a campaign, but it really does, especially when you're dealing with people that aren't going to knock on doors and they have a good access of funds. And I just want to remind everybody, don't look at the pocketbook, look at the candidate that is looking out for your interests. If you haven't seen your candidate knock on your door, guess what? They can't be that interested in what you have to say. So Kevin McDonald, he's here for you guys. You heard him talking with us today. And Kevin, go ahead and tell them again where they can reach you before we head out of here.
Oh, thanks. Elect Kevin McDonald is the Facebook page, and electkevinmcdonald@gmail.com is my email address. And anybody who wants to mail something, my post office box is 70011 in Wapasso, and the zip code is 32970 in Wapasso. And so they can make a contribution, or they can make a contribution online from our website as well.
Wonderful. And thank you again, Mike, my co-host. I love having you here with me. You always have some really great questions. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And share so everybody can hear what Kevin McDonald is bringing to the table. We're really excited. Thank you.